Greetings, everybody. We have gathered around again. Blah, 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 blah.
Greetings, everyone. Nigel's trying to gather while we gather. Are you gathered?
I'm presently gathered.
Are you gathered?
Not the least.
That's not
in
good.
the least.
No.
You should fix that.
Just gonna gather all of this.
So why do we have so much stuff, guys?
All right, so we've gathered around the table today to have a little conversation about steals.
Steel!
Yay, steel.
So many different kinds, so
Yep.
many different choices.
That there is. Kind of what we're going to do for the rundown is our top 2 favorite steals, and we are going to be breaking this up into a 2-parter episode. So first part, like I just mentioned, will be our top 2 favorite steals, and then we are going to do our favorite budget steal and our most disliked steal for the second video.
Want to get into what we're carrying today beforehand?
May as well, yeah.
All right. Well, for myself, Gale Bradley number 2, M4. Still awesome. Still great.
It is. All of those things.
A little bit rusty. A little bit rusty.
I cleaned it.
Fixed.
I cleaned it. I cleaned it. The action's nice now. It doesn't sound like sandpaper whenever I open it.
It's probably the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm carrying good old faithful. It's the number 1 in the collection. It's the S90 Osborne.
Understandable.
It's a beautiful thing. And blue thumb studs is also
Or
beautiful.
barrel spacers.
What? Yeah.
Not thumb studs?
They're not
Those are
thumb
still
studs,
silver.
No. These ones are
Would
just
you-
barrel spacers.
Would you like to have blue thumb studs?
No, I think it would be a little too blingy.
Okay.
But anyways,
I
He's
saw somebody
boring,
do that
remember?
mod.
That's true.
It didn't look terrible.
no. No.
Alright.
What are you carrying?
I am carrying the Line Steel SR1.
Mhm.
D2. Aluminum.
I like that knife. I likes it.
Integral.
It's a pretty nice.
Aluminum integral. Yeah.
Mhm.
Paul's got this thing where all of a sudden 2 pieces is too many pieces for him.
I want less screws.
So 1 pieces means better pieces.
It's very likely that this is going to become a thing for me, and it's going to hurt me and my wallet.
Well, knowing what Spyderco's got to offer here in
Yeah.
the near future.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, probably
Yeah.
not.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
And then I've broken the barrier, and I am carrying my Benchmade Shot Show sequel for the first time. Felt-
Indeed.
Yeah, felt like having some pocket jewelry today because I wasn't going to be using it, and just wanted the prettiness factor for it because I can, and why not?
And it is pretty.
Yeah.
And just to get a zoom in on the number, have we got the number on there somewhere? It is number
459.
out of 12,000? How many did they make of these bad boys this year?
1,200.
Or last year?
Last year.
1,000?
1,000.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's the normal, but
Mhm.
every once in a while they like to confuse people.
So an extra 200 out.
Yeah. Yeah, I called Nigel out for wearing pocket jewelry because it's a shot show night.
It's pretty.
It's so
It
pretty,
is a
and
pretty
it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, but it doesn't have a top steel.
No, it does
doesn't make
not.
the cut.
Nope.
What makes the cut, guys?
Where do we want to start?
I think we agreed to start with you and you because you agree on number 1 steel right now. More than anything else.
Yeah.
I'll
It
break you with the big
is-
boys.
CPM 3B.
Yeah, I'm noticing a pattern.
Oh, wait, except for one. There's
Yeah.
one of these things does not look like the other.
So this makes sense. This thing.
Oh,
I don't even know where
we
we're gonna put
forgot.
that.
We
You can
just
shift this
forgot
over here.
about the fantastic goodness of what
It just doesn't make any sense
the
Not
Spyderco
really.
Tough.
It is an odd duck for sure.
in every way possible. From steel choice through every other facet of that knife.
Well, if you're going to have a 3B knife, it probably should have a blood groove. And if it's got
That
a blood
is-
groove, that probably makes it so you can put it in a pistol grip so you can snap cut stuff if you need to. So, I mean, I think they worked backwards on this
A little
knife,
bit.
and I love them for that. I really do.
Some would call it a fuller.
Yeah,
No,
indeed.
blood groove.
So yeah, me personally, why I like 3B so much is the toughness of it. It is a fairly high vanadium steel, and in part with the CPM crucible powder metal technology, they were able to get a high number of vanadium carbides, which are very hard and aid to the wear resistance, but were able to keep the carbide small so it didn't increase the fragility of it and still kept its toughness by keeping the carbide small.
what he said.
Basically, you can beat away on it, and it's easy to return to its original
Yeah,
state.
and
Yeah,
you
it
can
is-
strap it on anything.
Yeah, it is a very abusable steel. Like Paul just said there, it's very easy to strap back up. And in my mind, and kind of what I've been figuring out in the last couple of days doing research and diving into the depths of knifesteelnerds.com, and geez, my mind's blowing up from that. It's confusing, but so interesting. Is kind of the wear resistance affects the sharpness because of how much the apex of the point wears away. If you've got a lower wear resistant steel, it will apex over and round over fairly largely. But if you've got a high wear resistant steel, it keeps that point fairly crisply as it's getting duller. So that's why these guys are so effective for stropping back up to keep sharp.
Makes sense.
They always hold that nice crisp edge, basically. They don't round away nearly as much. So if they are slowing down, it's just because of the toothiness of the apex itself.
Yeah.
You just have to bring that apex back, and you can just keep rocking it for a long time before it becomes rounded down and squared to the point where you actually have to sit down and redo it.
And I was going to say is that in my experience with a knife, if you're not the guy that's stropping every day, you get a very long usable edge where it may not be popping hairs and stuff like that, but it is doing all the work you need it to do still. And it's amazing how long it can do that when it doesn't feel sharp to the hand.
And that is because it still has that apex going
That's it.
through,
Yeah.
right? It hasn't rounded off like some other steels off the market or whatever, right? So, yeah.
And in hand with that, it is also a very, very tough steel because of it being a CPM technology, keeping the carbide small so the fractures don't travel through as easily and all that sorts of stuff. That it's just too nerdy. I'm not going to dive into it to keep the video shorter.
It is pretty
Good call.
nerdy stuff.
Yeah, but essentially it is a very, very, very tough, abusable steel that I have learned by batoning with this little guy, and it holds up wonderfully to it. So you can abuse the hell out of the steel.
And you don't particularly find it. Now, like the vast majority of these are fixed plates. Would you want a folder in 3V? And if so, what type of profile do you think?
Only if it looks like this.
You think so? But you want it to be a big clunky chunker. You don't want it to be this dainty little letter opener, right?
It's funny you say big clunky chunker because the other folder that I know of is a Boker folder that has 3V and a potentially emergency rescue orange G10, which is my dirty little secret in the knife world is emergency rescue orange.
It's not that secret.
I don't make it that secret, but it's,
It's a gross secret.
Anyway,
It's pretty gross.
yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but I will get a picture and get the blue B right there so we know what it is. But it's a big, thick tank of a knife as well.
These knives aren't particularly thin either. You know what I mean? Like all the fixed blades tend to be pretty thick at this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, like the thinnest is going to be the Master Hunter and the
Yeah.
Little Puko.
And either one of those are not exactly like they're thin up here, maybe. That works out, but
Very thin towards the edge, though.
Yes.
And very drastic distal taper. If
Yes.
you got that one up again, if you look at that compared to the Bark River that's remained very thick, this thing has a very slicey
And
edge.
you can get away with that with 3V because of how stable of a steel it is to begin with. So I think this is really playing to the strength of the steel.
Yeah.
for sure.
Yes and no. I think when you're working with an apex, when you're working with the convex, and you've got the sturdiness of a convex plus a steel that has a very, very crisp edge that holds it for a long time, I think that's where Bark Rivers will stand out. Compared to a Master Hunter that's got a traditional V-bevel on it, yes, it holds that, but it doesn't have the advantage of having a convex plus that holds that. So I think a traditional V-edge will go quicker. I'm very interested now that we've got one.
I'd like to figure out about that.
Potentially too.
Potentially two. And I've been eyeballing the 3V Mini Pembleton for, God knows how long, because I love the minis and I want one. Yeah. I will say that 3V was my honorable mention, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, for sure. So.
I was going to mention too that I've used my 3V Springbok there on a regular basis, chopping through like really thick, hard cardboard corners that, as far as like cardboard goes, I can't think of something more aggressive and abusive than that.
Like where it's almost MDF, like that really
Yeah,
kind
where
of
I'm
ridiculous
literally
crest.
hacking at it like
Yeah.
I'm hacking at a tree and taking it off of skids and stuff like that at work. And it holds up beautifully to stuff like that.
Kind of makes me want a 3V knife.
And
You should get it.
all I could think about there was a cardboard tree, and then because we're going into the season, I thought about a cardboard Christmas tree, and I thought about you cutting it down with your knife, and then that being still the worst tree ever.
Just bursting the flame from the lights.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, you hack it down cardboard trees, so. And it'll take that, and it'll hack down real trees and take that, as I've personally done with both of these bad boys, because these are the ones out of my personal collection. And I put the Bravo through hell. It is still my number one go off the grid and survive knife. If you told me one knife, my Bravo would still be number one.
It's fair. Very fair.
It's phenomenal for what it is, and 3V is crazy easy to resharpen as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't gotten into that with the 3V about the resharpening.
Keeping it at its peak.
But that's both of your number ones.
Yeah.
Paul and...
But don't let it go dull. Because then it becomes a little bit more of a pain in the butt.
Get the right tools.
Yeah, yes.
Of course.
And we were having this conversation before we started airing, and I told you it was going to come out, and it might not come out now, but exotic steels require proper tools to maintain.
And I will say that for how easy I find 3V to sharpen, I will definitely take sharpening 3V over some of the other choices that are sitting over on the table right now.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
I'm just saying it's easier to maintain. I mean,
Yes.
it's easier to maintain any edge than it is to resharpen it.
Yeah.
But ultimately,
At some point, you're going to have to.
Yeah, and this steel will keep the performance through regular maintenance for such a long time.
And as long as you don't abuse it. And that's the other thing when we're getting into some of these exotic steels is you got to remember that none of us chip our knives off of rocks. We're conscious about what we're doing before we're cutting. We're not abusive in any way. And sometimes with the Bravo, with the Gunny, I've smashed through some stuff and I've hit some things that, unfortunately, it happens. But
I dropped my M4 Essential.
yeah, when you're conscious about what you're hitting your edge on, you're doing very, very literal impact and striking damage more than you are just the wear resistance and the dulling.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to worry about that aspect less, I think, in our world being the knife nerds.
Yeah. And using mostly other stuff for EDC use.
Well, we're not bouncing these off of rocks, really.
Yeah.
Not intentionally. No.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you're out bushcrafting and you're doing some harder core things and some heavier, dutier things, we're still not bouncing them off rocks. We're still conscious about what we're doing in our activities more than the guys who are just hacking and slashing and kindling in the parking lot type of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Against concrete, against asphalt.
Yeah.
But overall, I think that's an excellent first pick.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah. I think that's a top choice for anyone, and it should be a top choice for anyone. If you get 3V, as long as it's a reasonable price point.
And if you have never played with it before, I would definitely suggest finding some to pick up and play with.
And on the last note, when it comes to reasonable price points, Cold Steel and their 3V is a very reasonable place to start when you want to get some 3V steel. Start with the Cold Steel brand because they've got phenomenal deals for their Cold Steel or 3V products, for sure. Not just that, AK-47 fixed blades, Warcrafts, they do a whole bunch of stuff in 3V that's pretty rocking.
Yeah.
Number one steel from Joe and I. We actually tied for number one as well. And that's good old M390 for me. And it's been number one. It has been number one for so many years. And I've seen steels come and go, and I've tried to believe that they were going to come and go. And at the end of the day, M390 is still standing on my list. Where the M390 blades just keep on coming out in my own personal collection.
Out of your own collection, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I've got some SHOT Show stuff that is M390 as well that did not come out on this particular episode. But I didn't dig through those. So
if you notice, I only have one M390 knife on the table, and it still was my number one pick. That's how impressed I am with it.
I don't have anything specifically in M390.
No, we don't. And we are going to dabble onto the variations of the M390s out there for sure. But these guys, when they came on the scene, M390 wasn't even a knife steel. It was a plastic molding steel, and one of the most popular ones they used it for was actually pressing CDs. And that's what they used M390 for more than what it was going to cut was just... And that tells you grooving CDs and how fine and pressing and like you've got to be able to press that polycarbonate into the exact form of CD. The precision on kind of how thin
how fine
and stable
and keep it that.
to be able to have that kind of precision speaks to what it does as a knife steel.
Yeah, the ability as like a pure cutting tool. Absolutely.
And I just want to kind of mention really quickly that a lot of the time, like just how Dennis mentioned that M390 started off as a tool steel for dies and pressing CDs and stuff like that, a lot of the time that's where most of our current super steels have come from, has been other industry.
High wear resistance.
Yeah,
steels
that's where 3V and all the 10V and that sort of
M4
stuff came from. And yeah, it's
154 CM was once ball bearings. That's
Yeah.
what they started out as.
yeah. So it's been a lot of research and development in other tool applications of the steels, and then they've made their way over into the knife world.
It's very rare where something starts out as a cutlery steel, although we will get into that.
And as well, the fine tuning with the heat treatment process.
Mhm.
Because I can almost guarantee that the heat treatment to make the mold is very different than to make the
I would
knife.
say
Yes.
So
Two
someone
different
got
tasks, yeah.
a hold of some M390 and was like, well, if I heat treated it this and this and this, and then the experimenting began until you got the science
the
of
stuff exactly what you're
how we
looking
can stabilize this to be the phenomenal edge that it is, right?
Mhm.
So, in a knife steel, it started to appear around 2010. And the earliest things I can find for M390 are actually like a McHenry that was a -1. And
Interesting.
that's one of the first ones I can find. I don't know if there was something before that, and if it was before that,
at. Is it a Benchmade?
Like a 710.
like
Yeah.
a 710. You got a 710 in your collection, the original one. Well, it's not an original one. It's got the D2 version of it. But yeah, it was a McHenry with M390. Other than that, it was actually probably this guy right here. It was actually probably one of the very first production knives. Guys were using them custom, obviously, and experimenting. But as far as a production knife goes, this, or there is a picture, and I showed it to Nigel earlier, of a Kershaw Volt that was released roughly around the same time in 2010. We all know the Volt as being a plastic-handled kind of cheapy that looks like an oh-so sweet. That was actually the Volt 2. The original Volt was a composite blade that had, I believe, Sandvik. It could have even been D2 on the spine, and then M390 on the edge. And it was a very sexy-looking knife for the originals.
It's a funky one.
It makes me like the Volt 2 almost enough to buy it. And I do highlight the almost.
Almost is the important thing there.
But then this guy here. And we have to give a shout out to the M390 MPR Seabird because they just released the micro. Unfortunately, in Canada, flippers and gravity stuff is really tricky, or I'd love to play with a brand new MPR. This is the OG MPR. And
It's a chunk.
Just a little bit.
it might have a place in history as far as bringing M390 onto the scene.
For sure. But it is a chunk. The only thing I was going to say about M390 personally is, because I don't own any myself, but I did play with this a fair amount in one of our previous
It has
videos.
a video.
And I was super impressed with its ability to take, like, the wear resistance that it had was very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, as far as daily cutting task EDC performance in a pocket knife, I love the fact that this thing came out close to 10 years ago as far as the first kind of
Iteration?
Iterations.
yeah, let's try that word. Of a pocket knife steel, and it's still king of the food chain to this day when you're talking about blade steels and what's out there. As soon as you say something has M390, people are like, oh, premium steel.
I've asked the question previously if there is one perfect steel. And this might be a front runner for it.
How many other super steels have flared up in the last 10 years?
That's what I'm
as
saying.
being the
Shown
next big
and then
thing,
disappeared.
Yeah.
and then bumping the cameras again.
I didn't hit it nearly as hard as Shut up.
But as far as being like having such a good balance of all major attributes for a pocket knife steel, stain resistance, wear resistance, general toughness. I mean, you don't need a pocket knife to be as tough as a sword, but the fact that it is as tough as it is.
And I will say, depending on heat treatment.
Yes.
Of course. The only thing I was going to say is if you're going to make a top 10 list of the best steels, this would have to be on it.
I don't think anyone argues that M390 is on the top 10 of everyone's. I got this new TRC, and when we're talking about damage you can do and edge retention and toughness and things like that, it is 0.89, I think we measured, something like that, thick on the spine. It was hundredths. I think we measured in the off-camera last week just because. And it's set to a 62 Rockwell, which is on the higher end of things. It is a little bit sensitive on what you can do.
0.214 millimeters.
0.214.
Yeah.
Pretty thin.
Millimeters?
Millimeters.
0.2. It couldn't possibly be.
0.2.
Oh.
That would have to be inches.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So to say 0.2 millimeters is like.
Paper.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, I had that
fractions
wrong.
of
Sorry. 2.14. My
There you go.
that makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense. Thank you for catching that.
And behind the edge, it's like hundredths.
Yeah.
So it'll roll super easy just because of how ridiculously thin it is.
Mhm.
But this was an EDC for years. This currently is an EDC. This is currently an EDC. This comes out to play, but it's a tank anyways. As far as what M390 can do as far as hitting it off of things and me cringing and going, oh, that might be damage, and looking at it and going, oh, it's fine.
Mhm.
Has happened so many times that there's a reason it's number one.
Not so much in this case, you're saying?
No, the
No.
thinness behind it and the hardness behind it, you're pushing limits. And I love the fact that people are pushing limits on the Rockwells.
Yeah.
But I think with this thinness, there's compensation of the thickness of a blade compared to the hardness of it. If you had something thicker, if you had a deeper convex edge, you can probably push it to a 62 and be okay.
Would you compare it rounding to like LMAX?
No, it was worse.
Worse than that, okay.
It rolled like a 1095 or a 1075 would roll.
Don't get the wrong impression. I didn't like LMAX, but
Yeah.
it rolls easy and comes back real
No,
quick.
but if you've had a Condor roll on you or an Ontario roll on you, it is like
10 series steel.
That's a roll of an edge, and that's what this did with that thinness and that hardness. So I can't say that for the rest of the M390s.
Nothing else you have is that thin, though.
No, and
Makes
it's
sense.
pushing limits, and I love it because it's pushing limits. But it also told me where those limits were,
Yeah.
right? So
0.43 on your fixed blade. 0.46 on the barrage.
I've also reprofiled a lot of things, and I've reprofiled.
You can see it.
That's behind the edge, though.
Yeah.
The thickness behind the edge is pretty comparable between those two.
But I believe, do they say a 60, you do a 62 or something like that? They give a variance.
I'm not sure about Benchmade.
Whereas the TRC, I believe, was specifically on like 62 on the nose type of thing.
Okay.
Where, again, like even that 1% variance, LMAX with Bark River, they were talking about their variances.
Would that variance come from like doing larger batches and therefore having some degree of?
It depends on your equipment.
Yeah.
The biggest if factor is what are you doing with your equipment. Having a temperature controlled kiln is fine. Having atmosphere control is fine, but there is going to be some variance.
Fair enough.
The more expensive your equipment, generally speaking, the better you can control it.
Bigger batches, heat treatment, things like that. If it was a more precise heat treatment on smaller batches
Well,
and
I was
things
just
like
wondering
that.
if like these are smaller batch and that was where they get the specific.
Yeah,
Rockwell.
TRC is out of Lithuania. If anyone is not familiar with TRC, they are worth checking out, guys. I picked
Yeah,
this bad
cool
boy up.
guys.
They got some thicker bushcrafty Bravo looking stuff. It's like, like worth checking out for sure. They were kind of on my radar. Now they're definitely on my radar.
Fair enough.
Number one. I've beat it up. This little round head, the best of both worlds, with the titanium and the carbon fibers and the M390s. You get a classic traditional there, and I have been scoping out more Lion Steels with different blade shapes because they got a couple, and I'd like to get a couple in my collection.
Yeah, that kind of tying into the M390s, we're going to pick up with what was my second choice being 20CV. And why we're going to try and kind of tie the two together is they are essentially the same steel, just being manufactured by different companies.
Literally almost identical.
Yeah.
The point
Speaks for
where
the same suit.
I would think that blindfold testing, two knives, the exact same blades, two different steels.
Lick, click. Lick, click. Yep, they taste the same.
Both taste like steel.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of why I chose the 20CV as my second choice is because it has better edge retention than the 3V, but the 3V is a tougher steel, and I'm abusable to stuff. This is known to everyone at the table here.
You beat yourself up, so it makes sense you'd want a tougher steel.
Mm-hmm.
And then having something like this for backup, makes total sense.
Yeah.
Having those combos is always a nice combo to have a tough steel and a nice wear-resistant steel.
Yeah, and you had actually asked the question when I was talking about, or me and Paul were talking about the 3V. You had asked if I would, what sort of pocket knife I would want a 3V in. I wouldn't. I would take 20CV.
Fair enough.
Because it's still decently tough, but for a pocket knife, I prefer the edge retention.
So would you say that this is your ultimate pocket knife steel?
That I have played with, that has come out into the market so far, potentially yes.
Really? That's an interesting statement. Yeah, with 20CV being the ultimate pocket knife steel right now on the market, that's an interesting statement. I'm just going to leave it at that right now.
Fair enough.
I quite like it.
For me, a big choice into the steels that I chose as my favorites was the ease of maintenance. Such as we had gone over with the 3V and how easy it is to strop up. Kind of the same sort of thing with 20CV and M390. Very easy to maintain, very easy to keep the sharpness, and they are still easy to sharpen once they do get dull. I don't find them to be a chore to sharpen.
On the other side of that
We'll get
spectrum, in my pocket, I've got M4, and the reason why it didn't make this list was because this does the job of being a pocket knife better for me, in my experience. It does everything so well.
So I will say that a lot of people's understanding, and even my own understanding, was that M390 was kind of the originators compared to the 20CBs or Carpenter's 204P, which is also a very identical steel on the market. Now, what I didn't realize was that 20CB has actually been around for 20 some odd years. I first heard about it popping up in 2000 on a Microtech knife that was a Greg Lightfoot design, of all things.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, called the LCC was the name of it, and it had 20 CB in the blade. And then in mid-2000s, SOG, of all things, came up with what they called a team leader. The SOG team leader that had 20 CB in it.
Full or fixed blade?
Fixed blade.
Very
other
interesting.
shades. We've got a blue picture of that as well.
I thought you said 2-liter.
No,
Me too.
it's all about the team leader, but it's the SOG. Yeah.
That's fine.
And sometimes SOG feels like they have 2 liters, but it's a team leader. Yeah, with 20 TV. So it flared in a couple places, but didn't catch on as a knife steel until it seems like Benchmade and M390 caught wind of it, and then all
The
of a
last
sudden
couple of years, 20CV has gone crazy across the board with a bunch of different companies.
Yeah.
Coming back on the market.
Yeah.
ZT and Benchmade in particular.
Yes.
And being a crucible steel.
And it's funny that having the thought that M390 may be an originator, but then seeing 20CV pop up repeatedly, it's kind of neat seeing like this resurgence.
It kind of makes me think if the other versions that, like the Greg Lightfoot and the SOG one, were just too early. Is people weren't ready for this level of a steel, and we hadn't learned how to use it properly.
Maybe I shouldn't be asking this, but what else was on the market at that time? What else was considered high-end but 154cm, BG42, S30V wasn't around until like 2006, was it? Like, it took a long time for stuff like that to start appearing, so maybe this was just way too hard to sharpen at the time.
Yeah.
440C was popular not too many years before that.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And compared to the Lightfoots with the 2001s, and apparently those did really well. And you read a lot about a lot of guys in the forums talk about, oh yeah, I had an LCC back in the day and whatever, right? But the SOG one, I can only imagine that the market the SOG was trying to fill and giving a whole bunch of Walmart and Canadian Tire and mass-produced 20 CV blade to go beat on in the bush and being like, why is this chipping?
It makes me sad just thinking about it.
Exactly.
You get your free pack of Tactic Kool-Aid with
You
it.
talk about a market not being ready for a steel.
Just
That is the market that will never be ready for this steel. Like,
Indeed.
And I mean, even like Microtech as a company, it's a much smaller company than Benchmade and everything else. So they're only going to have a limited supply into the market. So only so many people are going to hear about it.
Yeah.
So it popping up and then disappearing and then popping up over here and disappearing makes a lot of sense in that case.
Yep. That it does.
We're fading away some M390s and leaving the couple 20 CVs that we've got on the table at this point in time. We would have one other one, but Paul didn't bring his Anthem.
So no, he's got his Anthem in his pocket. May as well toss it up now that we have the room.
We're talking about 20 CVs. It's a beautiful 20 CV knife.
Mhm.
And again, with Paul and his integrals,
Yeah.
it's a thing. It's a thing. So, but yeah, it pretty much sums up on what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, all of the 20CV, M390, 204P, all of them are a very fine grain structure to them, take a very, very nice polish, just prettiness.
That is one of my all-time favorite features
Mhm.
of this steel, the fact that you can put a polish like that and the fact that it stays there as you use it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come back to that thought later.
All right.
That sums it up for 20 CVs.
I believe so.
And I think with that series of steels, that leads into crucible steels, which we didn't plan, but that's awesome that CPM 20 CV leads into another CPM steel.
Mm-hmm.
Rocket boys.
All right, so we want to go S90.
For your second pick, and S35 for my second pick. What the hell?
Yeah, bring out your.
I was just about to say.
The other S90 offering.
May as well.
Yeah.
The best knife on this goddamn table.
The PPT, right?
Wow.
But we should get the pocket lint out of there first.
You can tell it's you. Tell it's you.
It's well loved.
Oh yeah, that's an understatement.
So,
Yeah,
why don't you kick it off? Why was this your number 2?
I have been super impressed with how well this holds an edge, and I have had S110 in my collection for a longer time than I've had S90. But I really put S90 to the test of like keeping it stropped up. And if you keep it stropped up, it just stays absolutely razor sharp forever.
Mm-hmm.
I've not had to touch the edge with anything but a strop since I got it.
And even then, like for my own, I strop every maybe 2 weeks.
Fair enough.
I buff it up and I put a new edge on. Now I'm carrying a lot of stuff throughout the week because of what I have in my collection. So, but I get home and it doesn't matter what I throw on. I compare to throw on pajamas. That knife is light enough that it's in my pocket somewhere throughout the day.
There was a couple months where this was in my pocket every day, and it's still in my pocket probably 2 or 3 times a week. And even at that point, it still stays sharp. Like it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking before about like high vanadium steels or vanadium, however you want to pronounce it, and how like these steels are high vanadium steels, and then you look at the S90, and it's like off the charts. It's like 10%. Like it
gets
so,
crazy.
Yeah, it's
And
so far beyond anything else.
you throw in some tungsten in there to boot to
Yeah,
add
exactly,
some carbides
right?
to the mix,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah. Which, I mean, S35 in its own weirdness, rather than throwing in just a mass amount of that, they throw in a little bit of tungsten, a little bit of vanadium. But yeah, then they, just to throw in the mix of the S series of steels, they're like, how about some niobium?
Yeah.
Just to mess with everybody.
It's like, here, enjoy.
Topsy-turvy.
What other steels have niobium?
I don't know one off the top of my head.
There is a couple out there, and I'm looping, and we'll do one of those, because I know there's a couple out there that are popular steels with niobium, but I'm drawing a blank right now as well.
It's cool though because it takes the S35 takes what makes the S series of steels popular and kind of turns it on its head. It's a steel you don't really have to polish to get sharp, and then this you can polish right out.
The other steel's S110.
Yeah.
That has niobium. That's the other
Oh,
steel.
there
I
you
was
go.
thinking
That's
of.
hilarious.
Yeah, that was the other steel.
Referencing Knife Steel Nerds again, Laren did an excellent article talking about particulate size for carbides. Apparently, niobium-based carbides are among the smallest and the hardest, even harder than vanadium,
Crazy.
which
Nice.
is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
The reason why S35 makes it for me, not just because it's on a Sabenza,
Does help.
but comparison. This is essentially an evolution of S30V series of steels,
Mhm.
and S30V, contrary to what a lot of people seem to believe, S30V holds an edge better than S35. But as a bit of a trade-off, S35 becomes a little bit tougher, a little bit easier to sharpen, and will take a nicer polish. It's also, for manufacturers, it's a little bit easier to machine and play with. But for me, the reason why I like it most, it's like an upgraded 154 CM, and I love 154 CM. But just with how slicey you can get a grind like this with a steel like that, easy to repair damage.
Mhm.
That was the other thing.
S35 would be my honorable mention if I had one. That was
That's fair.
really hard
That's
not
fair.
to pick.
And it's because I've used it for so long and I'm so familiar with it, I'm sure that plays a part. But even directly
Same for me.
comparing it to other steels, it's like I can't think of very much bad to say about that steel.
It's impressive steel.
And maybe it's a bit of a cop-out saying, this is such a well-rounded steel, and then saying, this is such a well-rounded steel, but that really is why I appreciate these.
But it's having a well-rounded on a scale of a 10, and you're saying that one has got a 10 out of 10 and one's got a 9 out of 10 type of thing.
Yeah.
It
They're very close.
Yeah.
They do their job so well. And these, for me, and I think most of my decisions have been based on, like, this is an urban knife steel, really. I mean,
Yeah.
I quite like using it in the environments I'm in. If I'm out camping, maybe I would take something more like 1095 or 3V. But
What we're comparing right now, all of the stuff that we're comparing right now, if you put a blindfold on a person that didn't really know knife steels and put two of these knives in their hand, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them. Let's be honest here. At the end of the day, the average guy is not going to notice the difference between 3 months between sharpenings and a 4-month cycle between sharpening, because they're going to ding their edge before that anyways. That's not going to become an issue.
Yeah.
I will say the abuse you can put on S90 is ridiculous as far as
and unexpected. I mean, you think about the
Surprising.
high amount of vanadium things, like, is that going to end up being a little bit brittle? But
No.
you've...
Well, because of it being a CPM technology, they're able to keep the carbide small, which helps increase the toughness as long as they can keep the carbide small.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But even with powder metallurgy, within the realm of powder metallurgy, vanadium carbides are some of the largest.
Yeah.
But you've had a few incidents where you've caused some pretty interesting damage.
Oh, metal on metal contact for sure. I've bounced it off of a nail, and
I have witnessed.
I've done a couple different incidences where I've cringed expecting there to be damage, because you just know when you bounce your knife off of something that you don't plan on it.
Yeah.
You get that cringe, and I've looked at this knife more times than I can remember and cringed and been like, nope, it's still fine.
I banged this off racking, like
Yeah.
steel racking
Yeah.
at work.
Well,
and
there
rolled
was
it.
there was one time me and Dennis had come back from a hike, and I look over and he's digging rocks out of his boot treads with this guy.
I was using it, and then I realized it was a $400 stick, and then I was digging rocks.
If it makes you feel better, I've done the same thing with Sabenza,
You
but I wasn't
monsters.
using the flat, I was using the spine. So
Oh, it doesn't make you feel better. It just means we're both idiots.
hey,
I'm
that
pretty sure I
rock.
said that last week.
Yeah. But I found the same thing with S35. It doesn't take as much damage as one would expect, and it's easy enough to repair once it is damaged.
I think Crucible Steels, they're awesome stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can't go
yeah.
wrong with that.
They're
Metal,
on the map.
Seems to be a feature here.
Yeah.
powder metal,
Powder
Urgy.
metallurgy.
that's the word I'm looking for,
Yeah.
is very impressive stuff.
Yeah, they have done a lot for the steel technologies and pushing the boundaries and the limits of what is capable from steel, for sure.
On that note, powder metallurgies, I've got my number 2. Because you guys have all been spoken about your number 2s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's mine.
That is. That is. I'm sure you would like that back.
Number 2 is M4, and M4 tool steel. And at one point in time, even on the map, oh yeah, GB1 is in there with the GB2. Some places you can even see it be called Rex, the CPM Rex M4.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, apparently they wanted to throw that classification on this, and with all the Rex steels being popular, I was like, I had no idea that was thrown into that category. I just knew it as CPM M4 at that point in time, right? So, it's tankum steel.
Yeah.
Oh moly!
Doesn't like concrete.
No.
Well, don't chip your knives off of rocks is the ultimate moral of the story.
Don't drop your knives on
Is
concrete.
don't drop your knives on concrete.
A great lesson.
Or have the proper sharpening equipment. And we're going to come back to that conversation again. Anyway.
Even then.
So, what's the best thing
Yeah,
about this steel?
even then.
How well it holds an edge for like just doing abusive things you don't care about. The Contigo has been in my top 3 list. I've owned the Gale Bradley and done numerous things. It's got some scuffs and scars about me going through staples and bouncing off. People say toothier edge, but I put a high polished edge and I still get phenomenal performance out of a high polished edge on it.
And it looks so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
It does. My Contigo, I've got a pretty wicked shine going on that thing, and it's And just, the amount of abuse I can do on M4. For a long time, they were using it in blade sport competitions because as long as you're not doing anything abusive and you're just chopping wood and tennis balls and ping pong balls and rope and plastic bottles, and it will hold an edge forever. Like, it's fantastic.
It's kind of one of those things.
5 ever.
God damn it. It's one of those things where technique matters. You're not doing a weird twisty cut through a bunch of really hard to cut through material. You're plowing through in a straight line.
Very much so.
Yeah. Especially with hollow grinds.
I would definitely say it is definitely more of a power steel than a finesse steel when it comes to just like butchering through things type of thing, right? I've seen it on some finesse things. Like Gail Bradley had a knife called the Air from Spyderco that was very gentlemanly, and I kind of like to get it just because I like Gail Bradley's stuff. But M4 was a weird choice on that particular knife, right? The first to my knowledge started to appear in Spyderco, and they came out with a version of a military that had M4. And I did find a couple mules, which mules are normally an indication that they're testing a new steel.
Yeah, to put it
and I found some old Spyderco mules that had M4 and then the military. And then right after that, Benchmade came out with a knife called the LTFI, which is a weird bulb lump tanto titanium frame lock thing.
Weird.
With M4 on it. And that was kind of the introduction to the knife world to M4. I don't know what it was before it was a knife steel, but I'm sure it was another one of those plastic moldy whatever type of steels, right?
Some kind of tool steel, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the earlier tool steels that was developed in just the progression of tool steels, and it has been used for a long time from like drill bits, die presses, stuff like that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's up there. It's like I said, 3V got honorable mention, but the M4 took it out because of what kind of polish, what kind of toughness the M4 has over top of. I got the Gail Bradley. Everything's Gail Bradley right now. The Gunny Sidekicks, and this guy here with the clip point version of the M4. For an ED task being as thin as it is behind the edge, you can just slice and slice and slice.
An ED task.
Everyday task.
ED task.
It's not an everyday carry task. It's just an ED task.
It's an everyday task.
Yeah.
Isn't everything an everyday task?
Yeah.
I guess.
It's great for
Everything?
brushing your teeth.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Oh, boy. Oh, wow. Okay, gonna move away from that mental image and fucking sprint.
Tastes like pennies.
Is this new toothpaste, huh?
Oh, why is it red? CPM M4 on all these guys. Is there just an M4 that's not powdered steel?
I believe there is, because it's CPM only started in 72, and from my recollection, M4 was around longer than that.
Okay.
And it's his recollection.
Yes.
There's a lot of L's in that word.
Yep.
Extras.
Yeah.
Just in case you lose some.
No. Elk stress. It kind of works.
So disappointed.
You should be.
No. I'm very happy with that answer.
On that note, I think M4.
I'm just going to have to make a point on M4. As well, or how well it holds its edge and all that, I kind of don't like it. It is, in my mind, a little bit too tough of a steel, too hard to maintain.
Says the guy that's trying to get the chips out of my Essential.
I understand.
So I appreciate him.
I understand.
And that was a big weight into what I chose, was the ease of maintenance and the ease of sharpening, and M4 just gets into that realm that is a task and a chore and an effort to sharpen, and I don't like the effort put in for the outcome of it.
Isn't that a chore to sharpen too?
And that's where I would go into S90s being just as much of a chore in my mind as M4s.
I've mirror polished S110 for guys, and that's
understand.
not much of a pain in the ass as I'm having resharpening
See,
Paul's M4 Essential.
You
Fair
can
enough.
see with the polish on my Contigo that is not a factory edge nor a factory angle.
No.
I have reprofiled that, and that is a CPM M4. And like I said, the S90 on my Osborne, I think fought me a little bit more.
Fair enough.
But I think having the right equipment goes a long way.
Yeah.
I have better equipment to deal with the M4s than I did when I was trying to reprofile
But
this.
that being said, I do have the proper equipment at the
understand.
time. Yeah.
I just want to take this opportunity to mention that Nigel has attempted to forge M4
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And that's what I was also going to say is I think that's part of my dislike of it is trying to forge M4 is
Get a
oh my
power
god.
It's not.
Yeah,
It's
power
not a
hammer.
great time.
It-
So, go ahead. No.
Yeah, trying to forge M4 is like trying to smash down a brick wall with your head.
And this is while the steel's hot.
Yeah.
Like, I watched him do this, guys. It was not fun.
I go
No.
back to what I said. You need a power hammer if you're going to do something like
Yes.
that.
What's this conversation about proper tools for?
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
going full circle.
Yep.
All right. Do we want to take a break here?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's kind of, well, that'll kind of just round out the first half of these two-parter episode, so we may as well sign off for now for this first half.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone watching will see the second half next week. So for now, we will say goodnight. This is Nigel the Smith signing off.
I am who I am. I'm Dennis Vipers.
I am the Iron Joe.
XL.ca.
Alrighty, it'll be a few minutes.
Let's leave that in.
We don't need bigger knife. Yeah.